Right. Good evening, everybody. What a remarkable week this has been, not only in the state of California, but for hundreds of millions of people all across the United States. Now, roughly estimated 80 million Americans now living under some form of home isolation, stay-away orders against essential versus non-essential settings throughout the United States. This has been a very challenging time, and it's a time like this where we're filled with anxiety, filled with tremendous amount of uncertainty, and it's understandable people have a mindset of scarcity. You see that manifested in some of the purchasing decisions people are making, where they're overly indulged in getting a little more bread than they may need, a little bit more toilet paper than they may need, and the like. At the same time, it is a remarkable moment to be candid with you, and I cannot express more gratitude. At the same time, we're struggling through this moment, and that is the incredible mindset that also persists, not just here in California, but across this country. And it's a mindset of abundance of our belief that we can not only get through this, but in our capacity to meet this moment together. Let me tell you a little bit what I mean. I've had, just in the last 48 hours, the opportunity to speak to more scientists, more researchers, more engineers, more Nobel laureates, more CEOs of companies large and small than I have quite literally in years. I had the opportunity to have conversation with Tim Cook, who stepped up and he said, in addition to the 2 million masks that the Vice President said he would donate to the American people this year and this week, he's going to additionally provide 1 million just for the state of California. Elon Musk working overtime at Tesla to see if he can work with companies large and small, Philips and others, to see if he can start working up components on ventilators. And he announced to me today that he's going to provide 250,000 masks today for healthcare professionals just in the state of California. Also committing to over 1,000 ventilators just in a few days, the state of California, working through his supply chains and partnerships. Companies large and small. I was talking to a small company that does a little bit of manufacturing up in Santa Rosa, said they want to convert their manufacturing facility to help sew masks. Same, the seamstress down in Los Angeles, down in the garment district, said they'll do the same thing. Not only that, the largest companies, some of the largest manufacturers that happen to be based in the state of California, like the Gap, saying, we're ready to convert, we're ready to meet this moment, tell us what you need. Hospitals, incredible philanthropy, people that are literally sending planes to China on their own dime and bringing back resources and support from all around the world. It's quite literally not an exaggeration. It's not an exaggeration at all. I imagine governors all across this country are experiencing the same thing. It's ennobling, and it makes you feel like we truly can meet this moment. Accordingly, we have had a remarkable response in terms of the work that our own teams are doing. We've been able to distribute, we had 21 million masks in our reserves. We've been able to distribute 10 million of those masks last week. We put out an additional 1.5 million of those masks just in the last few days. We've got millions more, and we're trying to get them out into our system as quickly as possible. We were able to bring on Seton Hospital as part of our portfolio of surge. We were able to announce just today St. Vincent Hospital down in Los Angeles, now part of our portfolio. 490 rooms that will be operationalized, 750 in the next few weeks capacity. Community Hospital, and the great work that was done down in Long Beach with Mayor Garcia. He was able to get 130 rooms up online. People are already being transferred today and over this weekend. Working with our Sutter affiliate, CPMC, in San Francisco, 157 beds. We now have a term sheet to bring into our portfolio. We have folks at Coalinga, we have folks in Pacific Gardens that are committing with term sheets to increase our capacity in our hospital system. That, by the way, all told, is about 1,000 beds that we've been able to procure in just the last number of days. We were incredibly pleased to get a call from the White House. I want to thank President Trump. I want to thank Vice President Pence. We were able to get 8 field medical units into the state of California. That's going to provide 2,000 bed capacity for the state of California. These are those field medical stations that have been discussed across the last, few weeks all across this country. They're finally being delivered. They're on the way. We got our first tranche last night down in Riverside of the Strategic National Stockpile. And we are quite literally opening up those boxes as we speak, and we're starting to distribute those assets all throughout the state of California in real time. That's gowns, that's gloves, that's masks, and the like. It's just the first of 4 that will be arriving. We're told that they're already beginning to send the second order as I speak to you tonight. I say all that from a point of optimism, but also a point of deep realism in terms of the magnitude of meeting this moment. We have made it clear that we are prioritizing the most vulnerable Californians, and we've made clear that our most vulnerable Californians include the homeless. 108,000 unsheltered homeless in the state of California. I'm pleased to announce we have over 2,400 hotel rooms that we have already secured, 1,900 just down in San Diego County. Let me just tip my hat to the leaders in San Diego County in particular for securing those beds, and we'll make sure we secure the resources to get folks off the streets quickly and into those units. 7 counties now have already secured beds for homeless. We got those first trailers out and we are distributing them throughout the state of California. We have the purchase orders for those additional 1,200 that I referenced a day or so ago. All of that happening in real time. We've increased our goals in terms of the number of units we want for our homeless to 51,000 hotel rooms that we are committed to identifying, procuring, bringing into our portfolio to begin to get folks off the streets and the sidewalks, focusing our seniors that are out in the sidewalks, focusing on those that are in encampments and the like. So that's happening in real time. People need to know that. We also are focusing disproportionately and understandably on our senior populations. We've worked to identify roughly 1,000 additional skilled nursing facility beds that we will begin to negotiate and to bring online, again, to broaden our portfolio of opportunities to meet the coming needs in the next weeks and next months. Let me put all of this once again in perspective. The state of California has about 416 hospitals in the system. We have a bed capacity staffed currently about 78,000. Some of the projections that we put out make it clear that we'll need an additional 19,500 beds in order to meet our midway projections as it relates to the issue of COVID-19. We have surge capacity within the hospital system of a little over 10,000. So we're out there trying to procure 10,000 units. I mentioned the 10,000 beds. I mentioned the work with Seton, the other hospitals, the hotels we're bringing online, not just for homeless, but also the hotels that will also be part of a broader portfolio of needs to help us with our hospital system. That includes, by the way, support from the Army Corps of Engineers, which are out here yesterday, talking about how quickly they can convert those hotel rooms into quasi-hospitals, getting all the electrical and the ventilation equipment and turning those around in real time, working with the dormitories at the UC system, the CSU system, to do the same. Of course, the capacity in our fairgrounds, our convention centers. I can't tell you how many sporting leagues, not just owners of teams in this state, said, you know what, you want our arena? You can have our arena. We put together a matrix. It's just rather remarkable. It's almost worth just taking a look. Quite literally thousands and thousands of specific requests and examples that have been given to us in real time of people wanting to help and providing resources. So when we say that this has been a moment, it's been quite a moment of people reaching deep, going to the distance to really help support the cause of the state of California. And again, I imagine this is being replicated all across the United States of America. But again, in the framework of being sober about this moment, you know, to see these freeways in this state, you know, not congested. It was not the way we hope to reduce congestion in this state, and to recognize the number of people that have been laid off and the impacts to restaurants and hotels, the unemployment claims in this state. You know, 6 days ago, it was 40,000 unemployment claims. The next day was 70,000. Day after that, 80,000. Went up to 125, 135 2 days ago, and 114,000 yesterday. We're waiting for the new numbers as it relates to the claims today. It gives you a sense of the magnitude of those that are struggling at this moment, and I hope the magnitude that we all recognize to meet this moment in terms of the federal support that has to come not only our way, but to states large and small all across the United States. There's a spirit of collaboration, though, as it relates to this moment that also needs to be identified, and that is other governors sharing ideas and best practices with other governors. And I just want to applaud the incredible leadership, the stress that's been placed on Jay Inslee up in Washington State, Governor Brown up in Oregon, just on the West Coast. I was communicating with Governor Bullock in Montana. We're all in this together, not just what Jay Pritzker's doing and J.B. Pritzker in Illinois, and obviously Governor Cuomo's outstanding leadership, and what Governor Murphy did today in his announcement. I just want to applaud all of them for all of their work. The Governor of Ohio, I can go down the list. I just want to say we're all inspired, I think, by one another's work, and I think inspired to recognize that we all have insight, we all have capacity, and our ability to start sharing these as governors across the state have really, I think, inspired all of us, and I think raised the expectation that we can each do more and do better in our states. We've taken long-windedly ideas from other states, and I hope they've taken ideas from our state as well. We're working hard to address anxieties around testing, and let me just say this. We have been quite forthright about the testing issues related to the RNA extraction kits that were not part of the original test kits, some of the issues around reagents, words that people may not understand or appreciate, very familiar to our healthcare professionals. But now the bigger issue is swabs themselves, is specimen samples, and having the media to associate with the specimen samples. And it's just incumbent upon all of us to meet the moment and draw down support for those specimen collections. But as a consequence of that, and as a consequence of the scarcity in the testing that will become more abundant in the days and weeks to come, we need to, I think, have a different conversation in this country around testing. And that is smart testing, targeted testing, and really delineate what's the purpose of testing. My team is no longer providing me just the number of people that are tested positive. They're equally weighting the number of people that are tested negative. We're now looking at it from a community surveillance perspective. We're much broader in many respects, but also more targeted in other respects in terms of the way we're approaching the entire testing protocols. And I think this is something that needs to be replicated, and I think is in other parts of the country. The bottom line for us is we want to know what the spread is. We want to know if we're bending the curve. We want to know if our stay-at-home orders are effective. That's fundamentally the point of testing in terms of the broader sample. The more specific need for testing is self-evident, to change medical protocols, to address the deep anxieties our seniors have, people with compromised immune systems. All of them should be prioritized. People that are in the hospitals that have symptoms, and most significantly, our caregivers, to make sure they remain healthy throughout this process. But in the broader public, if you're young, you don't have any symptoms, I know you may have deep anxiety, just assume that you potentially are contagious and act accordingly. Socially distance yourself from others. Just use common sense. Be a good neighbor. Be a good citizen. Those young people that are still out there on the beaches thinking this is a party, time to grow up. Time to wake up. Time to recognize it's not just about the old folks. It's about your impact on their lives. Don't be selfish. Recognize you have a responsibility to meet this moment as well. I was talking to my kids the other day. My son said, "Why aren't you letting me outside?" I said, no, stay at home has a framework of common sense. I said to Hunter, you can go outside and play basketball. I said, just don't invite the neighbors and all your friends to come over. Use your common sense. And I want to encourage people to think accordingly. What is essential and non-essential is essentially what you think it is. We're going to make sure food and all our distribution networks are secure. And that clearly is essential. We're going to make sure that you can get access to medical supplies, the pharmacy, you can go to the laundromat. We're going to make sure transportation systems and our entire apparatus of security and infrastructure is well secured. And if you need to go outside to get some exercise, do that. But don't do that in a group setting. If you see a busy street, don't run down that street. Again, use common sense. You want to take a walk with your dog? Take a walk with your dog. Just don't do it with 5 or 6 neighbors. And if there are people around, just mind your space, socially distance yourself at least 6 feet. And if that becomes problematic, we'll start to enforce that, but not with a hammer. With a little bit of verbal communication. Just folks, just think about what you're doing here. And I just want to say, on the enforcement side, people are worried. We're going to have police. It's not. Social pressure is really moved remarkably quickly. And you've just seen that in what's happening in all of these states where we put out a directive and people are doing, by and large, the right thing. And if they're not doing the right thing, we have licensing capacity to enforce. We can shut down businesses that are just abusive of this moment. And clearly, we have other enforcement capacity. But I don't think we're at a point, certainly in the experiences we're having in California, not all equally spread. We recognize there are areas where we still have work to do to socialize these new protocols. But I think it's going remarkably well under those circumstances. We put out very detailed guidelines yesterday, and we're making sure those are distributed all across the state of California. I want to thank the California Chamber of Commerce for their incredible support of the guidelines to talk about what's essential and non-essential business. I want to thank the Teamsters. And this is not just a politician, pointing out a very proud and powerful labor union. But I'll tell you why I'm proud of the power and potency of the work of the Teamsters is these guys are focusing on you more than their families. I was talking to some of the representatives, Teamsters. These are the truckers. These are the guys that are out there doing the logistics in the warehouse. Those are the folks up in the Central Valley of the state of California, from farm to fork, making sure you're fed, making sure you should feel good and confident that the stocking of our shelves is going to be abundant. Even though there's some items that are a little scarce now, we're in a transition. They give me all the confidence in the world. 72 plus hours a week, working hard, getting home late, not even having time to pick up their own groceries. I just want to tip my hat to them, to the grocery store workers. 300 or 400 people they're coming into contact during the course of a shift. Their own health concerns at play. We have to be sensitive and really just tip their hat, have a little smile when you're in line. I know we're all stressed, but thank them for being there. They can go on unemployment. They're not. They're stepping up, stepping in. In fact, not only that, 10,000 open jobs today. If you've lost your job in the state of California, if you've got skills, call your local grocer. I assure you, thousands and thousands, 10,000 as of yesterday, open jobs just in that space. And it just redefines when we talk about heroes. It's, men and women in uniform, absolutely. But it's also folks that, frankly, sometimes we take for granted, that are also heroes meeting this moment, essential workers doing essentially extraordinary things. And again, putting their families second and putting you first. I want to just make this point as well. We are looking forward to addressing, I think, additional anxieties head on, and that has to do with our correction system, our prison system. We're working very aggressively to make sure that the folks within that system are getting appropriate support. Those that may have flu-like symptoms are getting isolated. I bring this up only because I've gotten a lot of calls on this, people expressing concern for the staff, not just for the inmates themselves. We shut down the visitation process, but folks coming in and out, that kind of mixing is a point of consideration and concern, and know that we're leaning into that and we're putting protocols and procedures in place as well. So that's broad strokes where we are. I want to just close by making one final point, and then we'll, of course, happily answer all the questions we can get. We need more support from the federal government, and I'm very, very encouraged by the conversations we're having on the USS Mercy, on the conversations we've had directly with the President and the Vice President on the strategic stockpile, and the work that we're doing not just with HSS but DOD on getting these mobile field hospitals out in the state of California as well. Pre-position, make sure we're anticipating where we'll be in a week or two, and making sure we meet that moment. And so in that spirit of collaboration and cooperation, the spirit defines this moment, I want to just open up to questions from the press, and again, thank everybody for their remarkable patience and understanding during these very, very challenging times.
We have first question from Phil Willen, Los Angeles Times.
Make sure we're anticipating where we'll be in a week or two, and making sure.
Yeah, Phil, I'm sorry.
Phil Willen, Los Angeles Times, go ahead.
Hello?
Hi, Phil.
Can you hear me all right?
Perfectly.
Governor, you mentioned about some people kind of ignoring social distancing, and we're getting and seeing a lot of reports around the state about that, and kind of increasing concern about people who are following the rule. And I know you were talking about kind of social pressure to do it, and you don't want to use the hammer, but some people kind of want the local authorities to use the hammer to make sure the communities are safe. I mean, what do you think you can do to help the concern?
Well, we're a nation state, 40 million strong, fifth largest economy in the world, and we are a state where 27% of us are foreign born. And I say that to only make this point. Mixed status families, people that speak many different languages. This directive was sent out less than 24 hours ago. It has been remarkably well received under the circumstance and socialized remarkably well. So you're absolutely right. There are instances and there are parts of our state and communities that haven't necessarily gotten the message, quite literally, not just figuratively. So we have a whole media campaign working with our partners at Facebook and Twitter. Others had provided free ads, new PSAs that we just put up. You're starting to see billboards all throughout the state of California asking people they need information to go to COVID19.ca.gov, covid19.ca.gov to learn what it is and what it isn't. And we're working with mayors on their thoughts about best approach to enforcement. And to the extent we feel people remain stubborn over the next few days, we will increase our efforts not only in outreach, encouragement, and to the extent we must on appropriate enforcement.
Jeremy White, Politico.
Governor, thanks for giving us a moment this afternoon. I wanted to ask you a question about your point about needing a new approach to testing. If I heard you correctly, are you saying that the state needs to be testing not just people with symptoms, but a broader range of people so we can ascertain the direction of this pandemic?
Let me tell you what we've done. We are very pleased. There's been 3 community surveillance testing efforts that have already taken place in the state, in Orange County, in Los Angeles, and Santa Clara County. These were just broad random tests that were done with people that otherwise were young and healthy and thought they were perfectly fine and didn't contract the virus. We got the percentage returns of positives in those cases, and it's given us a sense of how many people are out there that are likely impacting and infecting other people that don't even know that they have the virus. That was very helpful, just those 3 spot tests on the community surveillance, because it allowed us to understand what's really happening at a granular level on the ground and allows us to resource accordingly. That is very helpful from a testing protocol perspective. And while we want tests available to everybody on demand, we certainly do, until we have the abundance of tests, we want to be more strategic and do the traditional testing for those that have symptoms, that are dealing with underlying health conditions, that are vulnerable populations, our seniors, or those that are in the hospital system already, and certainly our frontline employees, not just our healthcare professionals, our paramedics, our police and fire, but also some of those in the logistics sector that I think also deserve prioritization of testing. In addition, though, smart testing, targeted testing, more community testing, this community surveillance in the lexicon and the nomenclature of our healthcare professionals is also critical to meet the moment.
Sophia Balog, Sacramento Bee.
Hi, Governor. Thanks for taking our questions. I'm wondering if there are any state laws governing scope of practice for doctors and nurses that you're planning to waive, such as current limitations on nurse practitioners that I know has been a topic of discussion in the legislature for a while, or even bringing in nursing students to staff hospitals. Can you talk a bit about what you're planning to do on that front?
Yeah, so we have an executive order. Thank you for prompting this. We call it omnibus executive order. Too lengthy to go into details directly to screen, but we will provide all of those details. They go to issues of staffing ratios, which is a variant on your question, goes to flexibility, which is direct to your question within the hospital setting, so we can maximize our footprint, allow us to repurpose sections of our system. And I say sections of our system broadly defined, not just hospital settings. The executive order in this case is not about ratios at hospitals. I want to make that clear. But this is around adult facilities. This is around community clinics. And so we are socializing conversations in real time to go specifically to the issue of scope of practice. But there are a series of steps we have taken today that go to your point and to your question. And I assure you there'll be many other steps in the next days and weeks.
Samantha Young, Kaiser Health News.
Governor, thank you for taking the questions. Just kind of a follow-up to a question I asked earlier, but I know you've asked a lot of people to stay home, but we are getting a lot of mixed messages. You turn on the TV this morning, and there are images of people at the farmers market downtown Sacramento. They're just crowded, standing next to each other. You see people standing in line to go into the grocery store, and it just does send this mixed message to people that they aren't social. There's no social distancing going on, and this is, a lot of people I talk to say, well, that's not fair. This doesn't seem to be working, and we're just staying in our houses. And I'm wondering, what your message is to people when they see these things on TV.
Well, I don't know if it's mixed messaging, because I'm not sure that's an intentional message. It's a mixed practice that is occurring throughout the country, not just here in California. Again, I'll remind everybody it's been less than 24 hours since our stay-at-home order went into effect. For many other states, it's the same. The reality is people are going to have to change behavior. There'll be social pressure to do that. You should have distance, at least 6 feet, between people when you're queuing in lines. And it's good that folks that are being pushed up against one another to remind their neighbors in a loving way of those protocols and those processes. And I think you're also seeing images of people taking this quite seriously. You're seeing streets in cities large and small that are vacant, that are empty. And you're seeing, no kids in playgrounds. So you're also seeing those quote unquote messages that people are also receiving. So this is part of the process and protocol. It's going to take a little time to see advanced. And, we're confident people are going to start changing behaviors in real time. I know it feels like 24 hours in California. It's been a couple days in this state, forgive me, but it's nonetheless very early in this process. And I think people are going to meet this moment.
Hi, Governor. Thanks for, I'll echo everybody else. Thanks for taking time to talk to us. Can we talk a bit about California's plans to potentially create its own coronavirus test or develop drugs independently from the federal government? And what might that look like? Or have you had those conversations or initiated those steps to get there?
We had a pretty remarkable conversations. I was pleased to have just yesterday with the CEO of Genentech, California-based company, CEO of Gilead, California-based company. The reason I bring those two up is not only they're home-based companies, but they're very top of mind as it relates to what President Trump and Vice President Pence, as well as other representatives from federal government and the task force have been referring to some of these treatments. We are in the state of California in deep partnership with those companies. The UC system and its 5 hospitals are in advanced trials with many of the drugs that have been referenced in the last few days very publicly. So we already are deeply advancing those protocols and partnerships. I was on the phone with the CEOs just to ask what more they need from the state of California, more they need from our research institutions and the like. And so I'm very, very comfortable and confident that those are proceeding. I don't want to get ahead of my skis. I don't want to get into some of the details of where they think we are. That's being discussed more appropriately from a national perspective. But no, California is trying to amplify that research, amplify the focus on treatment, and really look to see once those treatments become available that they're made readily available in not only the state, but can be produced at a scale, manufactured. A lot of those facilities are in this state to provide the needs of the American people.
Laurel Rosenhall, CalMatters.
Thanks. Hi. You mentioned at the beginning a bunch of companies that are stepping up to help make supplies, and I was just wondering if you could tell us specifically some of those companies and how that happened. Did you approach them? Did they approach you? Give us a sense of the backdrop.
Let me give you a specific. I know a lot of folks in this country are talking about, well, it's time to start imposing ourselves from a federal perspective, along lines we've done in war, a little bit during Katrina, as it relates to Defense Production Act. And I think that's a healthy conversation. Let me say that's already happening here in the state of California. Here's a specific proof point. We reached out to KR, who runs Bloom Energy in the state of California, manufacturer here in the state, well known to Californians, particularly in the green energy space. KR said, what do you need? We're ready to go. And we said, well, why don't we test this? You produce these remarkable fuel cells that are power fuel cells. You've got all kinds of technical capacity. We have all of these old ventilators that we've been storing for years. They have to be repurposed. The manufacturer said the following: to repurpose about 200 of them is going to take a month. We challenge you to do more and do better. And so KR sent me a photo today, not making this up, of 24 specific ventilators that he got done just in a few hours. And he says, come down, certify these, inspect them. And if these things are certified and we're confident you're going to sign off, give us the rest. We're ready to go to task. We're already repurposing in this country. We're already repurposing in the state of California. Reached out to Elon Musk, said the same, says, look, I'm on this, not just for Tesla, but SpaceX. I know other people have been calling him all across the country. He's not just looking, I don't want to speak out of school, on the ventilator side and the parts side, but he's also looking with his remarkable capacity on 3D printing and other things that he could provide. So you're already seeing this manifest, certainly in the state of California, and I got to imagine that is replicated in other parts of the country. And so I hope folks know that, and those are just two very specific proof points.
Jim Roop, Westwood One News.
Governor, thank you very much for taking our questions. There are two concerns that we're hearing about. Number one is the policy that's in place for protections from foreclosures and evictions. I think it's through May 31st is what you have now. And when people go back to work in the middle of May, let's say, they start working for 2 weeks, they're not going to be able to catch up to really start making those payments from the weeks they've been out of work. So would it be prudent to allow the policy to say, from the time you go back to work, you're protected for 60 days? That's the first concern. The second concern is the homeless situation. The people that are being housed in these assets that you're procuring, which is great. And by the way, no one's complaining about these policies, but these are some concerns. What happens when this crisis is over with those people who were homeless and now in these assets? If the plan is for them to remain housed, what is that plan to facilitate that? Thank you.
I appreciate that, and we are putting that together in real time. Trust me, that's deeply part of our conversation. We're not just thinking situationally, we're also thinking sustainably. Every decision we're making is done very pragmatically in a sequential way. We're just breaking these things down, problem solving in real time. And so we're trying to address the acuity of the crisis in the moment. That's getting people off the streets, getting them into these units, and then anticipate the challenge in 3, 4, 5, 6 months. We hope 3, 4, 5, 6 months as this current crisis begins to shift, and then we have to deal with that issue. So that's part of our protocols and process. And by the way, let me just be straight with you and candid. It's one of the big challenges we have with the counties and the cities right now, because trust me, they're saying if we're going to absorb the social services, of which, as you know, I just put an emergency appropriation of additional $150 million in this space in this last week to help the counties with the costs. They want to know that those dollars will not just be temporary and they can absorb those longer term. And so we're negotiating with not only the operators of these hotels, we're also negotiating with the owners to see if we can purchase outright some of these hotels, not just lease them temporarily, that go to begin to answer your long-term question. But our deeper anxiety always is the social services, the wraparound services that are required, not just the physical occupancy of these units, but to address the mental health issues and the underlying reasons people are out in the streets and sidewalks in the first place. So that's number one. As it relates to, look, the broader issues around evictions and broader issues related to mortgages, more broadly defined, here's a preview. I have a team of people that have been working over the course of the last 3 days. I want us to be very careful in this space when it comes to dealing with banks. We can make announcements that may not be true, and I want to make an announcement that is substantive and real as it relates to mortgages and as it relates to payments. And I expect to have, my team assures me, and this is going to put them on the spot, by Tuesday to have a very substantive answer for you. But it also goes to your specific question about timelines in previous executive orders that we will look to adjust in real time. Let me give you an example of one we already have adjusted. It's related to the issue of tax payments. Before the president moved forward wisely as it relates to April 15th, moving to July 15th, we had already put out our executive order. We needed to now confirm, or rather conform, with the federal guidelines, so we adjusted it to extend ours from June in the current order to July 15th, so it lines up more appropriate with the federal government. You'll see more of that, including, forgive me for being long-winded, including a recognition that things are not delivered equally in the state of California. When I say we're a nation state, 470 plus cities, 58 counties, different rules, regulations, different representation, different concerns, different points of view. And localism is determinative in the state of California in many ways. And so as it relates to how they're dealing with evictions, not only for tenants of residences, but also tenants of commercial establishments, if they're not meeting the moment, we certainly can strengthen our provisions, not just strengthen deadlines, but strengthen the provisions as well. So we're monitoring that in real time.
Matt Levin, CalMatters.
Hi, Governor. Thanks for answering questions. I just wanted to follow up specifically on the renter protections from eviction issue. So since your executive order came in on Monday night, renters groups have criticized it pretty widely, saying it doesn't go far enough, doesn't protect evictions that were already underway. The Riverside Sheriff, County Sheriff, is still performing lockouts as of Friday. I was wondering if you're planning on revisiting the executive order.
Well, forgive me, literally, don't mean to be flippant. That's exactly what I was just referring to in the answer of that last question. So absolutely, unequivocally looking in real time to see how this is manifesting in different cities. You could contrast Riverside to the incredible work they've done in Los Angeles and San Jose and in San Francisco. Those are points of contrast where they've taken it to a whole nother level, but there are parts of the state where they haven't. And so the answer is absolutely, we're looking to make adjustments in real time, and that's a perfect example of why it's appropriate that we have that mindset. And we'll be moving, as we're moving, quite honestly, in 100 other cases and 100 directions. We're going to move to address that based upon what's happening at the local level and based upon that legitimate anxiety.
John Myers, Los Angeles Times.
Governor, thank you. And just a note, too, a lot of reporters weren't able to get questions in the other day. Hope you'll be able to stick around for some of them. I just want to clarify the statewide order with some of the local orders, because we have called around to a lot of folks and there's confusion about which one takes effect where, what supersedes what. And so my question is, are Californians supposed to abide by the most strict version of what they're under, whether it's the local or the state, because it's not always the same. Sometimes local is more strict, sometimes state is more strict. Obviously, I'm not talking about the areas that didn't have a stay-at-home before. I'm talking about the ones that have a local one. What are they supposed to do there in terms of following which order?
Yeah, so we've been working in real time. As you know well, 20 counties had a version of those orders. Each one, not each one, the 6 in the Bay Area counties went together. Many of them have augmented their orders. Others that joined, some 21.3 million Californians were under those previous orders. We put out our overlay. That directive works for the entire state, and we are quite honestly answering, John, that question in real time, working with county health officials, local electeds, and we're working through a myriad of those specific examples, and they get very, very granular, those examples, from issues that range from hairdressers, nail salons, to cannabis suppliers, and what type of licensing under cannabis. Is it medical or is it recreational? And so all of that, forgive me, is deeply complex and deeply being focused on. But there are 16 core constructs that go to essential services that are universally accepted, and that is the architecture for the statewide overlay. And then we are working to address more of these nuanced one-off issues, and we are not ideological about this order. When I submitted this order, you recall me saying specifically that we're open to argument, interested in evidence, and that we will iterate and we will listen to the changing applications and concerns related to it, and work with our local partners.
Thank you, Governor. One more question. I mean, you talked about surge capacity, and it's one thing to add 10 to 20,000 new beds. It's another to have the doctors, nurses, and support staff to support that. And I'm just curious about where those medical personnel are going to come from. And on the military mobile medical units that you were talking about, do they include doctors and nurses from the military?
Yeah, I mean, well, as it relates to the specifics around Seton comes with staff. St. Vincent does not. We're working to procure staff. Community Hospital in Long Beach substantially comes with staff, and we are augmenting. So the answer to that question is it depends on the specific site, the specific facility. As it relates to the federal assets, there are 2 different sections of assets that are being provided, both the Department of Defense and then HSS. As it relates to the HSS assets, they're more physical assets, and there is some human support, human resource support, but we have to augment, and we are doing so in real time by making sure that we are getting additional staff. Let me tell you how we're doing that. In the omnibus executive order I put out today, it includes retired annuitants, and we're providing more flexibility to bring people that are retired into that system. I mentioned 2 days ago, as you may recall, surveying with our largest public employees union, all of our state employees. We have firefighters, paramedics, we have healthcare professionals that also are part of this larger conversation, and we're seeing how we can redirect and repurpose some of those job descriptions to provide for that additional surge. Obviously working with our hospital system and our nurses and others. So that's a big part of this conversation, and trust me, front and center in terms of our deliberations.
Governor, do you have any plans at this point to shut down highways or any points of entry into and out of California, either at the Mexican border or at borders with other states?
No, we have no plans at this moment. I'd be candid with you. We haven't even discussed any planning along these lines. We have gamed out scenarios. The federal government decided to move, and not surprisingly, there was a variant of that in Southern California on the border. That was part of an anticipated move by the administration, and so we're in real time adjusting to those concerns. I'm very worried about the national capacity with our air traffic controllers to stay healthy, to make sure that our logistics folks stay healthy. And so all those things will force us to adjust in real time. As you know, and this shouldn't alarm people, but we put out 500 National Guard, not to shut anything down, not for enforcement operations, but humanitarian work to provide for our food banks. I should just note, we've seen food banks, the number of volunteers at food banks drop. And here, just in our backyard, Sacramento, 2 days ago, they were down 65% of their volunteers are not coming to volunteer. So we have a whole volunteer effort, and the National Guard is part of that. Just remarkable group of young men and women that are out there, getting on those trucks to make sure supplies are taken off the shelves, making sure folks are getting appropriate deliveries from our centralized stations, and also making sure that last mile delivery is occurring. But they're also gearing up to the extent necessary and to help provide the mutual aid that I spoke about a few days ago to local law enforcement, includes the California Highway Patrol, to make sure all our logistics is operational, to make sure the highways are operating efficiently and effectively, and all those points of connection to make sure that people have confidence, as they should, in our food delivery and procurement throughout the state of California. That's where our deepest frame of focus from a security perspective now lies.
Final question from Jeremy White, Political.
Governor, thanks for taking one more question. I just wanted to follow up on some of my colleagues' questions about potential restrictions. You mentioned seeing a lot of folks still out there on the beach. Is there a scenario in which we could get some sort of order restricting access or shutting down parks, forests, beaches, that type of sort of public gathering space where some people have not quite caught on yet?
Yeah, I hope not, because that would defeat the purpose of meeting this moment, and I think we're going to meet this moment. I have more confidence in the people of the state of California. And again, this is a remarkable moment. The largest state, we move first to begin this kind of home isolation, and it's going to take a little bit of time. I mean, we're not even 48 hours into that process, and we're going to see how this plays out in the next days. I mean, it's incumbent upon all of us to move quickly to change our behaviors, but I want people to feel free to walk their dog. I just don't want them to walk their dog where there's hundreds of others concentrated. I want people to feel free to take a deep breath, fresh air, get some exercise. Take a nice walk, hike out in nature, walk along the beach, just not with thousands of others. And so, again, it's not a mixed message. It's simple common sense. And common sense is in abundance. Most of us, after the first few years of life, started to develop it through trial and error, good parenting, but also social pressure. And I'm counting on social pressure, not law enforcement, to do that. But there's always scenarios where there's abuse or ignorance, or neglect, or naivete, and just as our parents did, we'll have to admonish that, and we'll use the number of tools in our toolkit to do that. So that's the last question. Let me just thank everybody again for their patience. Thank you for their flexibility. Thank you for their capacity of understanding. And in closing, thank you for the sense of spirit and the pride that everybody, I think, has instilled, at least in me and many others, neighbors all across this state. This is a remarkable moment, and the people of California, you're meeting this moment overwhelmingly. And I recognize I've been in elected office for many, many years. You can't legislate spirit. You can't legislate pride. That doesn't come through an executive order. It doesn't come through an emergency declaration. It comes through the sum total of acts of individual kindness and decency, of people that stand taller than anybody else by bending on one knee to help lift other people up. Let's keep lifting each other up. Let's meet this moment head on. I look forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you, everybody.